We're now joined by the National Chief for the Assembly of First Nations, RoseAnne Archibald. Chief Archibald, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin, there have been so many news points out of the gathering this week, but one very interesting point is a big name, Murray Sinclair, because you've now turned to him to help navigate, I guess, what can be described as rough waters within the AFN right now. What exactly are you hoping he can do?
Well, Murray is very well respected across Turtle Island, and he was instrumental in bringing together the major final settlement on child welfare. He was instrumental there. We did have two conflicting resolutions at our SCA, our Special Chiefs Assembly, and he was actually the person that was brought in to bring the parties together. So he's really seen as a unifying force, somebody that we really all admire and look up to, and obviously has really great mediation skills and conflict resolution skills. And so we have reached out to him. We have had a number of discussions. We haven't signed a contract with him per se, but we are in discussions with him to help us navigate some of the more difficult conversations that we are having as an AFN executive.
So discussions, any ideas to when he might come on stream to help things out?
I believe in the new year, we're going to have more discussions with him. I will be talking to him over the next week just to confirm timeframes and when and how he will meet with us. So those details are yet to be sorted out. And then again, as I said, we don't have a contract with him. So it might turn out that he isn't available. So we're really hopeful that he is, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's turn to the issues themselves, because of course you and I will have an opportunity to speak the new year. But in terms of the issues that were raised up at the gathering, the Assembly did pass a unanimous motion expressing its opposition to the federal government's gun bill C-21. The amendments seem to be the real issue here, as it expanded the gun bill, the amendments introduced after the second reading. What is your take on that? How has that disadvantaged First Nations communities?
We use firearms for hunting and harvesting animals for our communities. It's a part of our food sovereignty. It's a part of our food security chain. And so firearms to us are tools. They're not weapons. And I think that's the big difference between how the rest of Canada might view the issue of the gun control legislation is that they are often used as weapons in non-Indigenous society more than they are as tools for hunting and gathering, which they are for us. And so that's the concern, is that as we put more restrictions on guns that we use for hunting and harvesting, we're really beginning to impact what we call our right to do that activity, because many of us are covered by treaties across this country, and we really look to those treaty rights. They mention our lifestyle, that the way that we live will not be impeded by the governments that come into our territories, that the way that we have our relationship with the lands and animals will not be impacted by settlers who come into our lands. But what we're seeing more and more is pieces of legislation like this, and even the privatization of Crown land. Those kinds of things really impact us in terms of our traditional lifestyles. And it's traditional in the sense that it's carried on even today. Mm-hmm. And so that's why this of legislation is very important to us, to make sure that it doesn't infringe on those rights.
Mm-hmm. Now, another essential issue that delegates came together on had to do with child welfare compensation. You passed a resolution on child welfare cases, essentially bridging the class action settlement, the proposed agreement, and the compensation order from the Human Rights Tribunal. Now, Cindy Blackstock said that it should end any thought of pitting First Nation leaders against each other. Now, you've worked with this government. Do you think that's what they were doing here, pitting First Nations leaders against each other?
You know, there are situations where we are in a relationship with this government where they do use divide and conquer as a tactic. We've seen that for generations. And so we want to be mindful of that and make sure that those things don't happen moving forward. In terms of these two resolutions, they were originally titled 16 and 17. And I'm really grateful to Cindy Blackstock for joining us in our meeting and being a part of those discussions. And even Murray Sinclair, as I said, was a part of those discussions to bring those two resolutions together. And so in terms of the government, it was really meaningful for the chiefs to be driving that process. They were the ones who were in those meetings, fixing those resolutions, and really, as they said, presenting a united front to the government that we're not going to be divided about how our children are compensated. What's most important about these resolutions is that it's going to cover every child, every parent, grandparents. It's going to cover all of the different classes within the final settlement agreement, and it's going to cover what the CHRT ruling said as well. So it covers everyone, and that to me is a big step forward because nobody's going to be left behind.
Quickly running out of time here, but I just want to ask you very briefly, how are you feeling about the meeting now that it's done?
You know, it was a bit of a difficult start. You know, we've had a very difficult AGA in July. And I think that even at the beginning of my speech, I talked about all of us like taking a collective breath together and starting to move forward in a good way. And I feel like we did that. We had a somewhat of a difficult issue to deal with at the beginning. But once we got through that, everyone really came together. And there's a big difference. It's like night and day compared to what happened in July versus what happened this week. And so it's a real step forward. People were working together, they were unified, and my role as the national chief is really to create space for those kinds of concepts around truth and accountability, transparency, creating a safe space where good decisions can be made. And I feel like together with the chiefs, we did that.
RoseAnne Archibald, always good to speak with you. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
You too. Take care.